Smile by aatticsaltt. Before I start, guys, I'm in Disneyland Paris. I'm so happy right now. Surprising Peter with a trip to Disney World was among Tony's brighter ideas. Recording Tony telling Peter they were going to Disney had been one of Rhodey's best. The joy on the kid's face had given Tony a lot to preen and brag about to anyone who dared come within a 5-foot radius of him, be it at the grocery store or press conferences. It was nothing compared to whenever they arrived at Disney. Peter had run him ragged within the first hour of being there, full of boundless, childish delight as he explored the park. They probably covered the entirety of Magic Kingdom within 2 hours, and abused their fast passes in order to ride every ride at least twice before Peter had to practically carry Tony back to the hotel room. "I can't keep up, Peppa," he bemoaned to his fiancée over the phone that evening. Peppa had stayed home instead of tagging along, and Tony was starting to think she had the right idea. "My legs are throbbing. Throbbing! That's how much we ran around today. I'm not going to have legs by the time we come back."
"You're the one who begged for me to let you take him to Disney," she said fondly. "Peppa has never gone to Disney. Peppa, going to Disney is a fundamental bonding experience."
"It is," Tony grumbled. "I wish you were here so you could experience being dragged around by a hyperactive teenager all day."
Peppa laughed. "No, you don't. I'd take away from your precious Peter time."
And god damn it, she was right. Tony knew the only reason she didn't agree to come on this trip is because Tony was stingy and selfish and wanted Peter's attention solely to himself. Peppa knew him well enough to insist the trip should just be between the two of them, and despite the fact he would likely be returning to New York with stubs for legs, Tony wouldn't have had it any other way. Bright and early the next morning, at the god-awful hour of 7 a.m, Peter came bursting into Tony's room, already dressed and ready for the next day of exploration. He threw himself over Tony, who grunted with the added weight, and poked at Tony enough that he finally acquiesced and got out of his nice, plush hotel bed. "You're a little menace," Tony said accusingly, shoving a finger in Peter's face as he clambered out of the sheets. The little shit just grinned.
"Tell me something I don't know, Mr. Stark."
Today they were going to Typhoon Lagoon. Peter had his swim trunks on with an obnoxiously bright yellow Disney t-shirt and his now signature Mickey Mouse ears he refused to take off. Tony decided, what the hell, might as well match, and unearthed his equally hideous yellow shirt and Mickey Mouse ears from the mound of merchandise they had bought yesterday. Peter's smile at their matching clothes was worth looking like the world's worst highlighter. To no one's surprise, an hour into Typhoon Lagoon, both Tony and Peter were soaked to the bone. Pete had insisted on going down storm slides at least 7 times before he was satisfied enough to move on. When they passed by Catch a Kiddie Creek, Tony said Peter ought to splash around with the other kids. "You're definitely short enough for it," Tony said, grinning at the affronted glare on Peter's face.
"Guess that means you'd fit right in too, Mr. Stark."
"Hey!" It wasn't until after lunch, where Peter put down 4 turkey legs and terrified everyone who saw him inhaling the food, that they spotted one of the first characters walking around. Tony was sure there were plenty of them, but at the high speed Peter hauled them around the park at, it was no surprise they hadn't run into any of them yet. They spent more time on the rides and attraction than looking for characters. And, true to the theme of the park, Lilo and Stitch were walking around Typhoon Lagoon, waving at all the little kids walking past. Peter zeroed in on the poor, unsuspecting characters, and had Tony on his feet before his mind registered the fact that Peter was moving. He nearly lost his wallet in Peter's haste to get up and chase down Lilo and Stitch.
"We gotta take pictures with them, Mr. Stark," Peter said, breathless with excitement. "Can we? I know it costs money, but I've always wanted to meet them."
"Jeez, kid," Tony said. He stumbled a bit in the effort to keep up with Peter, but managed to not fall flat on his face. I told you 1,000,000 times already. I'm a billionaire. I can afford as many pictures as your little heart desires. A delighted giggle escaped Peter as they reached a smiling Lilo and a very grumpy-looking Stitch. They welcomed Peter's hugs and ushered them both in for a picture, never minding the fact that Tony had stowed away his sunglasses after getting annoyed with the water all over the lenses, and both Tony and Peter were still dripping wet. The cameraman gave them a thumbs up and disappeared behind the camera. Smile, everyone! Stitch, you too! Tony never smiled for photographs. Or, if he did, it was never quite willingly. But yesterday and today had been filled with joy, spending all the time his heart could possibly desire with his favourite person on the planet. Peter was tucked up against his side, warm, wet, and so very much alive. The smile on Peter's face looked like it hurt, and before he knew it, Tony was smiling too. Great! The cameraman said as his shutter click-clacked. These look amazing, guys! He definitely has his father's smile. Tony's heart skipped a beat, or 7. He has his father's smile. Peter has his father's smile. Peter has Tony's smile. Because Richard Parker was long gone, and either the cameraman didn't know who he was, or just made the assumption Tony Stark wouldn't go to Disney World willingly with anyone else but his own son. Didn't he, though? Didn't he just drop everything for a whole week to take his kid, his son, to Disney? The cameraman kept talking, kept taking pictures, but all Tony could see was the teenager under his arm. Peter was still beaming, and Tony could see where the cameraman saw their similarities. The same dark eyes, and the same half-crooked smile. They never talked about their relationship, but they'd never needed to. Tony never needed a label to put on the love he had for Peter Parker before. My son. Over the quiet surprise in his mind, Tony thought he rather liked the sound of Peter being his son. The next picture featured the father-son duo in matching soaked outfits and Mickey Mouse ears standing next to Lilo and Stitch. Tony's lips were pressed against Peter's head, eyes closed, as Peter openly leaned into him. The picture found a permanent home on Tony's phone, computer screen, and his dresser. So every morning, Tony could wake up to the sight of his son smiling. It was pretty nice to be a dad. End of this little one-shot. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. I've absolutely loved Disney for my whole life, and the idea of this is just gorgeous. A lovely little simple one-shot, and I cannot tell you how happy I am here. I'm exhausted, but I'm so happy. This is one of the few places in the world I can openly be myself. I've been walking around in dresses and tiaras, Disney bounding as Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, and I've counted 33 kids asked me if I was one of the princesses. Like, they would stop and openly stare and point, "Princess," when they looked at me, and I had to tell them that I wasn't, but they didn't mind and they said that I looked like one. I'm so happy. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Find my guys, girls, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.